All right, cool. So Amiri Paul here. So you are a coach, mentor. You've coached over 2,000 people, and you kind of help people break through, mental blocks and give them the exact strategies to go or kind of find a way to reinvent themselves, right?
Yes.
Now, I think a lot of people kind of suffer through mental breakdowns or they get lost because I mentioned before hitting record is that we're living in a fixed way of living, I think, right? But before we talk about that, kind of give us your origin story of how you became a coach and a mentor.
Cool, man. Yeah. So just for clarification, I've professionally coached over 200,
Yeah.
not 2,000. But so I don't want to get, but yeah, that's a much bigger number. But I've worked with easily over 1,000 people in different
Yeah.
capacities.
Hmm.
But I've professionally coached over 200. My origin story is um, so when I moved to Las Vegas in when I was 20 years old, and I'm 36 now. And when I moved here, I was somebody who had a lot of trauma and just sort of mental health challenges when I was going through my early teens up until my 20s. And I moved to Vegas kind of like as a way to try and escape um, the pain in many ways. I was looking for like some way to just almost disassociate and just get involved in a lifestyle where I wouldn't have to think so much about my problems, right? Party, have fun, all that, And so it really served its purpose in the beginning, but really the truth was for my whole 20s, man, I was really just a troubled person. I really struggled with my mental health. Um, for me, I definitely would find whatever I could to try and just busy myself. And on some level, it did lead to some success in my mid 20s because a little bit of that was just working really hard for a period of time. So, in Vegas, I was the first person to really throw the largest music festival before EDC came, right. So I rented out an arena, and in fact, the EDC guys brought me over and invited me to potentially partner with EDC Las Vegas before it was EDC Las Vegas, and then they went off. I decided not to do it; it wasn't for me, and they went off and they did it, and huge things obviously happened for them. But um, I was a musician from about 25 to 30, and I found myself actually fairly successful in that world. Meaning, we had the big agent, we were touring, we did one big tour of the country. All the while, as they say, artists are typically starving, and that's true, right? I had the credentials to my name, but I was broke through the entire process, and living in the ghetto here in Las Vegas, and it was a really rough time. Um, and so for me, I finally made a little bit of money, and I came off this tour, and it was like I finally, after all these years of hustling trying to make it in music, I finally did something where there was impact, and we toured the country, and we grew a fan base. But I had this realization that I don't think I'm meant to do this. I feel like there's something more um, for me than just making people dance and and creating that environment for people. I think that there's a lot of beauty in music and the people who do it, but for me, I felt like I was called to do something more, and I threw in the towel. I gave up on my music career right at the peak of it, and quite frankly, I just realized like I've got a lot of work to do. Like I was really struggling in my own life, both professionally and mentally, and I kind of hit this rock bottom point after all of after that whole decade of 20 to 30, and I found myself kind of just I found myself saying I gotta fix myself. I gotta figure out how to better me because I don't know if I can do another 10 or 20 years of this. You know what I mean? Like I just don't know. Something's gonna happen here. Like I don't know if I'm gonna you know do myself in with my own bad habits or if something bad's going to happen to me, but I got to figure this out. And I knew that I was royally effed up. And I thought to myself, if I can fix me, if I can do that, then I will dedicate the rest of my life to helping other people do the same thing too. If I can undo all the psychological trauma and stuff that was plaguing me, the PTSD and the anxiety disorder and all this kind of stuff, then if I could do that, then anyone can too. Right. And so I really just went to work for about 2 years on just rebuilding myself. And it was the most uncomfortable, unpleasant 2 years of my life because it was like learning to walk again. Right. It was like everything I did in my life, I realized they were all horrible habits. Everything everything I was doing was on some level, it wasn't moving me forward. And I had to like sort of realize that I was really just, everything was walking me down the wrong path. And so I just became obsessed with, finding out every kind of practice, science, tool, technique to recondition a human being. And so for me, it started with everything from, I dabbled early on in stuff like psychedelics, which I don't, these days I don't do that, but like I was searching, and then I tried different forms of meditation. And then I started finding out different psychological practices, everything from NLP to Gestalt, and all these different psychological practices that were designed to create a change in a person. And so I started really pursuing those. And then I got really obsessed with the science of creating transformation in the human psyche, right? How do you take somebody who's got a phobia or a trauma or has a memory that when they think about it, it creates panic or anxiety, and how do you change that in the shortest period of time? And I found that people were doing that, so I started learning those tools and techniques. It really started out as me trying to fix me. That's really where it began. And then it quickly became, well, I'm going to work on me, but I've loved my whole life. I've always wanted to help people. I've always liked seeing people change. And I think that that's true for a lot of people. I think human beings, we tend to really feel alive, not just when we're feeding ourselves, but when we notice that we're feeding other people too, right? There's something that comes from a sense of contribution. It's like you get energy from that. And so I got addicted. I got addicted to just personal development and really becoming the best I could be in creating rapid transformation in a person. And my career just kind of took off from there. And it's been a really beautiful journey. I'm still very much in the middle of it, but I went from being broke and I was able to do a career that was a passion of mine, but then I found that it was also really lucrative too, because I was creating the impact.
Now, do you think that to change your life or someone else's life, that person has to experience, or have an inflection point? Because I don't think that maybe overnight you just wake up one day and like, you know what, my life is messed up. I really have to change it. And not everyone gets that one moment. Maybe it takes them a while to get it, but maybe in that one moment they do decide to have to make a drastic change. So is that something that you saw in yourself and on others as well, where they do have to find the pinpoint in that one transitional period and moment of time to change your life for the better?
Totally, man. Is there cursing allowed on this
Yeah,
podcast?
yeah.
Okay, cool. So I just want to be clear.
That's
Right. But look, you're right. We all have to hit what I call a threshold. What I really call it though, is I call it the fuck this point. And the reason I call it that is you got to hit that point. You go, all right, dude, you know what? Fuck this, right? Fuck this. No more. I'm done. Right. And I find that when people hit that point, it feels horrible, right? No one likes being there, but that's life's way of kind of giving you an opening, right? It doesn't feel good, but it's really one of the best places you could be to make a new decision. Because we all, at some level, we are more motivated by pain than we are by pleasure instinctively, right? Both, and everyone's a little different. Some people do prefer pleasure over pain, but at the root, on an instinctive level, pain moves us faster. And sometimes, yes, I should say most of the time, people do need to hit a point where they do feel some form of pain or as you said, that kind of that moment where, I can't remember the term that you used, but yeah, it's kind of that threshold. Where you say, now, is that always the case? No. I think if you mature, and I think that as you grow and you get wiser, you don't wait for the house to be burning down to realize, you've made some wrong moves. I think that as you grow, you start noticing things just when they become slightly uncomfortable, or maybe when you realize that you're a little maybe bored with something. You don't have to wait for it to get so intense that,
Yeah.
everything is really shit's hitting the fan, so to speak.
So when you rebuilt yourself, at what point, what was the next step that you took to help others and kind of create a framework around that and become a coach / mentor, professional coach?
Yeah. So what I did is I started, I took pretty much, whatever savings I had, I started putting it into going to different conferences and seminars and everything I could do to put myself in the right environment. Because one thing I realized was, in order to make a change in myself, I realized the fastest way to do it wasn't just to work in private, which is great to do things on your own, but just by putting myself in the right environment, there's a momentum that you can create by being in a room with people who are where you want to be. So I put myself in those environments where people were doing the things that they're already doing the things I wanted to do. And for me, what really got me from sort of an amateur or someone who was just working on me to actually having a career as a coach was it really did become an obsession of mine to want to use these tools on whoever I could. And it really probably started with me being annoying and like friends and family. I would try and help them all the time. And then I quickly learned that that's not, if it's not invited, you don't do it. But in the beginning, it really was that. I became so fascinated by the idea of creating change in people and wanting to help people and watch them transform whatever their problem was, that I would just use it on everyone whenever I could. I would volunteer my services.
Mm-hmm.
I became obsessed with just everything from reading to listening to things to practicing my skills. And what I found was I started helping people, and then people started talking about the help I did with them. And so what I found was, for me, it was about adding enough value to a person and making enough of a change to where there was sort of that viral effect of them becoming a raving fan, because now they wanted to share their transformation because they were so excited about it. And then from there, it started becoming kind of a referral-based business where things took off without me having to do a lick of marketing.
I think that's really dope because you said you were very obsessed about it, and I think to some part of it, it became a really strong passion. And once you find a new passion, then it's game over. You're gonna do whatever it takes because at that point, it doesn't really feel like a job. You just love it, and a lot of good things can come out of it, especially if you work long term. But it won't feel like work because you're just so deep in it and you feel, very passionate about what you're doing.
Totally, man. Yeah. I mean, no matter what, you're going to be living, every day is going to be a day, right? Meaning like you're going to be awake, you're going to be living through the day. So you may fill it with what you're passionate with. And I'm a firm believer that whatever you're truly passionate in, you can find a way to monetize that. Whatever you're truly passionate in, if you think cleverly and you think about how you can actually use it to solve a problem or how you can use it to add value, I think that there's a way to monetize virtually every single passion.
Yeah, I definitely believe that as well. Now, I kind of want to talk about how monetizing that passion is it's a good idea, right? But not many people know their passions, and I feel that society, they give us a fixed path where you go to school, go to college, you get a full time job, get married, and that's really about it. But in reality, there are other things that you can do out of the norm, right? And that's going to a 2 year college, getting an associate's degree, getting a good job, or literally traveling the world. As long as you're just happy or you find a passion and you find a way to, like you said, monetize that. But not everyone is on that path. They're on the sixth path that society gives us. And as a result, I think a lot of people feel either anxious or lost because they don't know what to do. Once they get into the position of, oh, I'm 20 something, I'm a professional now in my job, but I'm not happy. I don't feel fulfilled. And of course, we don't want to get to that point and, reach that threshold. Instead, we want to go back and kind of maybe take a look at ourselves to see what could we do before we reach that threshold. So what do you think are some good practices for people who kind of feel lost or going day by day, just letting the world take them as it is without them having a plan? Like what's the first step of finding a passion to see what they really want in life?
Yeah, sure. So, there's a lot of ways, I think to clarify, I think what you're saying is just to clarify your question, you're asking, how does someone really tap into their passion? How do they even know what their passion is?
Yeah, and then maybe that can deviate them from what they're actually doing, which is maybe going to school or getting a full-time job, etc.
For sure. So, you know, it's kind of like we talked about, like, threshold is not a bad place to be. It doesn't feel good, but oftentimes that's where a pivot point happens in your life, right? You hit that
Mhm.
position, you're not happy anymore, and suddenly your brain's looking for some new solutions to get out of that pain, right?
Mhm.
And guide your brain through those painful experiences. Some people, they try to get out of pain by watching TV. Some people try to get out of pain by drinking alcohol. Some people try to get out of pain by watching porn, right? Whatever it is, but if you're conscious, then you can guide that pain and ask yourself better questions and really see, all right, well, what's a long-term way to get me out of this that would actually light me up, not just a momentary escape from pain, but something that would really kind of like move me forward and create a life that I love. And sometimes a great way to start is by allowing yourself to go into the pain. Like, don't hide from it. It doesn't hurt. It wouldn't listen, it wouldn't hurt you or anybody to feel like shit for 5 or 10 minutes consciously, to say, to really get yourself to that point of like, what's this really costing me? I mean, what's my life going to look like if I stay in this job for 10 more years? I mean, am I really going to be proud of the person, that I become if I just stay on this trajectory? What's the real cost of this? Like really allowing yourself to feel that. When you can get into a state of passion, be it positive or negative, sometimes like that's a state where you can honestly, it brings you to a place where you can think and make new decisions because you're at that place where like your mind is awake. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so like, when you're in that place, sometimes I say, look, here's a little strategy that I use with some people. I get them into a kind of an animated state. And I say, listen, I want you for the next 5 minutes to write down everything that you absolutely hate. Like the kind of job that you hate and what you hate about that job and what would be a version of hell for you, right? What do you really not want in your life? Because what's great is a lot of times people just go to what they want, but sometimes it's really useful to start with what you don't want. Because when you know what you don't want, it's really clear than what you do want. It's just sometimes that's a quicker way in than just saying, hey, what do you really want in your life? Sometimes just starting to saying, listen, what don't you want? What's driving you nuts? What do you hate, right? So start there and then write all that out, right? And then you're going to have a pretty clear picture of what you don't want. And you're going to be pretty much left with what you do want. And then you say, listen, what do you want your life to be about? Like, what are you passionate about? What can you talk about for hours? And it doesn't take your energy, it gives it to you. Or what can you do for hours where it doesn't take your energy? And when you're done with it, you feel lit up, you feel alive.
Mm-hmm.
What gives you like a sense of joy? What lights you up? Who do you want to be? What do you want to, what do you want to represent to people in this world? And some of those questions you might not have an answer for, but it's basically a strategy of going into pain deliberately and then going into clarity and some pleasure, right? And then from there, you're pretty much going to be left with your job from heaven in a way, because you'll have some clarity on what you do want. And you might not have total clarity, but you'll have a general picture of what you're interested in. And from that point, you got to decide, what the next step is going to be from that position, and when you decide, it might not be that you do it tonight or tomorrow, but it's like, you got to have a decision on, listen, I want to start moving in this direction. It's not like I'm going to quit my job tonight, but this is where I'm going. Like I'm headed in this direction. So you decide, you dedicate yourself to that decision, and then you deliver on that decision, right? So it's decide, dedicate, and deliver. So it says, for example, it's like, for me, it was, I was making music. I was going month to month, paycheck to paycheck. Sometimes I was just, flat out. I didn't have rent and things like that. Well, I hated the position I was in. And I knew I did. I hate the way that I'm feeling. I hate, the man that I'm becoming. I feel like I'm amounting to nothing. My whole life is all about me, so I let myself feel the pain. And then I went to pleasure, right? It's like, what have I always really loved? What do I really want my life to be about? And for me, it was really easy. It was like, I've always loved helping people. I've always been passionate about like growth, and I haven't been doing that for so many years. Right. And in that moment, I knew, because I was so passionate, I was so intense, I hit that threshold, a decision became easy. I said, I don't know how the hell I'm going to do this, but my new decision is I'm going to pursue something that's more meaningful to me. I'm not like, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm done with this old shit. It's no longer serving me. And then from that point, I dedicated myself to it. I knew I scheduled things out, right? I made it a point to find ways to, I found different, within like 48 hours, I looked things up and I found ways I could put myself in certain environments and things like that to just kind of get the ball rolling. Again, I didn't know what the big picture would look like. I just knew I wanted to dedicate myself to something that was meaningful. I wanted to grow, I wanted to help people. That was it. Then I put myself in certain environments to sort of stimulate that a little bit. And then I delivered, meaning I resolved, I followed through on it. And in that process is one way that you can take yourself from going through the motions and living a life of without purpose in many ways, to agitating yourself enough and giving yourself some clarity on what you do want.
For sure. And, there's this quote that kind of reminds me of what you kind of all said. It goes along the lines where, everybody wants sunshine. Nobody wants rain, but you can have a rainbow without a little rain, I think, something along those lines. And point is, you got to be realistic. You can't have you can't live in a utopia where everyone's happy. You need a little bit of pain so you can know what pleasure is about, right?
Yeah.
And the things that the pain is kind of a way to, you can use that as a spring or a stepping stone to get
Uh,
to where you want to be. That
yeah.
inflection point when it comes about, you got to use that to your advantage, because like you
Yeah.
said, you make a list of things that you don't want compared to things that you do want, and you want to stay away from the things that you don't want. I think there's a psychology, or there's a study where people, they'd rather lose, since you're in Las Vegas, you probably already know this, but in terms of betting,
Yeah.
people, if you lose $100 compared to winning $100, in terms of the feeling of gratification is not really matched. So you need to win $1,000, and then if you lose 100, that same feeling is kind of matched. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that there's a disproportionate amount of feeling when you lose something rather than you gaining something, and sometimes you have to use that loss as an advantage to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There, and that comes. You're absolutely right, man. And that comes back to the kind of what we talked about. Like pain is a greater motivator. And the
Hmm.
best leaders in the world, in my opinion, the best leaders, they know how to give themselves pain and pleasure, because what wires your brain, what conditions you is pain and pleasure. Those are the two forces that ultimately condition your unconscious. Meaning, if I link pain to something, like I'll give you an example, really elementary one, but it paints the picture. What's your motivation to touch a hot stove?
Probably show someone to show off. I don't know.
Okay, so maybe in a way that's interesting. You link pleasure to doing that because you want to show off to somebody.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, no one thinks twice of like, damn, I really want to touch that hot stove. No
Hmm.
one, that doesn't go through anyone's mind because they link what to it,
Yeah.
right? Link pain to it, right?
Hmm.
Whenever your brain knows that doing X equals pain, you just without any sort of um, conscious, decisive thinking or any kind of thinking about it, really, you just don't want to do it. When you
Hmm.
link pleasure to something without having to think about it, you do want to do it. So why is this important? Is because if you want to be an effective leader, if you want to condition yourself to be successful in anything, you have to know how to give yourself pain for not doing it and give yourself pleasure for doing it. Because when you do that, you activate the unconscious mind's desire to avoid the loss of it, and you'll unconsciously be driven to achieve it because you link so much pleasure to it. The
Hmm.
issue with most people is they don't link enough pain or pleasure to the thing that they want. And so it's kind of in this middle territory. And so they'll do it when it's convenient, but there's no real hunger there. There's no drive. All hunger is a sense of loss to not eating. Basically, it's like, oh, I got to eat because if I don't, there's tremendous pain. And then you want to eat because you know that by doing that, it'll nourish you and you'll have pleasure there, right? So the best leaders know how to give themselves pleasure and pain. And I think as entrepreneurs, especially, because entrepreneurship is about self-motivation. You don't have a boss over your shoulder. You must know how to give yourself pain and pleasure. You got to know how to tweak those knobs inside of yourself so that you can be motivated every single morning to want to go and hit it again, even though you might have lost the day before, which entrepreneurship, you will. You'll have peaks and valleys. But what gets you keep getting back up is the sense of pain to not getting back up and the sense of pleasure to getting back up and succeeding again.
So where do you
Hopefully
think
that.
yeah. So where do you think are some good exercises to get some pleasure? Because as an entrepreneur, like you mentioned, there is no boss, right? You're your own boss. You have to figure things out. If not, then you're not going to eat, right? Or you're not
Right.
going to have any rent, or for example. So are there some exercises that you recommend? Maybe, for example, you can work very, very long days. Don't do anything stupid in terms of entertainment, but at the end of the day, to really, you know, relax and just de-stress, maybe you can watch some Netflix. That can be something that you look towards to at the end of the day after you put in your work.
Sure. So let's actually chunk this up a notch. Actually, let's look at this even bigger. So the way the brain works is if you do something, like let's just say, for example, that every single time you or whoever your listeners are speak to their significant other, right?
Hmm.
And every time they speak to their significant other, they're in a bad mood. So they're in a bad mood, they see their significant other. They're in a bad mood, they see their significant other. They're in a bad mood, they see their significant other. All right, great. Now, they're in a great mood one day, the significant other walks to the door, how are they going to feel? What's
Well,
the mood going to go to?
if you're in a good mood,
You're in a good mood, but you've just for the last week or two, every time you've seen your significant other's face.
I see what you mean. So you kind of primed yourself to be in a bad mood when you see that person.
Well, yeah. So basically, whatever state you're in gets linked to whatever you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if, for example, you're stressed out and you go to work, you're stressed out and you go to work, you're stressed out and you go to work. Now, all you got to do is go to work and you're going to feel stressed because it's they call it an anchor.
Yeah.
Meaning unconscious mind associates stress to this stimulus, to work.
That makes sense.
Right? That makes sense? Okay.
Yeah.
And so, like, one of the ways of being strategic in linking pleasure to what you do is when you're working, if it's always just grinding and stress, you're going to have to use a lot of willpower to want to go to work after a while, because your brain's going to go, this shit's painful. I don't want to go to this. Right? So you have to push yourself all the time, and push is awesome. It's fine. I love push, but you're not at your best if you're always having to push yourself all the time. There comes a point where you want it to be pull, where you want to feel like you're in flow and you're not having to force it every single day. Right? And so one of the ways to do that is when you're at work, every hour, blast some fun, your favorite music, man, and fucking just have a dance party, right? Literally using your body to generate positive biochemistry so that, like, you're associating fun to the environment around you, so that you're associating good feelings to work, right? Or, you can work in really, really exciting environments. Like there are some times where I live in Vegas, I live pretty much on the Strip. And to me, the Wynn is the most beautiful hotel. The Wynn Hotel is gorgeous, right? It's like a 5-star hotel. Sometimes I'll go there and I'll just do my work there, because to me, the environment is so positive that it just makes, it brings a good state to me. So I get to bring that positive state to my work, And then my work, naturally, unconsciously, my brain links positivity to work. So that's one way of doing it, right? So you could bring a bunch of positive stimulus into your work environment so that your brain links all this pleasure to work. And then it'll be easier to sort of be willing to get up and go to work, right? Because your brain links all this joy to it. Now, another way of doing it is you want to reward yourself whenever you do the right thing. Whenever you have success, or whenever you do a full day, or even when you fail, because as an entrepreneur, we all know failure is going to be a part of the journey. Much like in life, to be a successful individual in anything, you have to have enough failure so you have data to know what works and what doesn't work, right? So you want to train yourself to even be cool and to celebrate the failure, because you want to reframe it as a learning, right? So whenever you do something in work, at the end of the day or every couple hours, give yourself the proverbial pat in the back, right? So for me, it sounds kind of funny, but like I might just, for no reason, pretend it starts off as me kind of acting, but I'll just be like, yes, like, good job. Hell yeah, dude, you're fucking killing it. Awesome, right? And what's funny is if you've seen the studies from Harvard, they show that by, power posturing, I don't know if you've seen this, but by standing like Wonder Woman for a couple minutes, for 2 minutes, just by standing like this, your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, goes down by about 25%. Just by standing like this for 2 minutes, not doing anything else. Just your testosterone, which is let's think about that as your confidence hormone, that goes up by about 20%. And here's what's crazy. Your risk tolerance, what they found in this study that they did at Harvard, your risk tolerance, your chances of taking a risk because you feel less stressed and more confident, goes up by about 40%. That's just by standing like this. And what she showed was, even though it's bullshit, even though you're not even thinking about anything, it starts out as you just acting as if you're standing like Wonder Woman. But there comes a point when your brain doesn't know the difference between you acting and you really being in the state that you're pretending to be in, and it just goes ahead and it creates the biochemistry that you'd be creating if you really were confident. It's sort of like if you fake laugh for a while, there comes a point where the laughter kind of becomes real laughter, right? So sometimes just by manufacturing excitement or positivity or rewarding yourself or whatever that is, patting yourself on the back, it starts out as you just acting the part, but after about a minute, it becomes real in your body and you start linking pleasure and rewards to doing the very thing that you just did.
So it's a way for the conscious mind to really trick the subconscious mind to make you feel better.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what you're doing.
Damn.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it that way. That's pretty dope then. So you think for any habit, and a bad habit, is that really the premise here, that what you have to do is you have to use your conscious mind to do certain things for an extended period of time so that your subconscious mind can change for the better?
Yes.
Sheesh.
Yes.
So, what are some, because yeah, changing the subconscious mind, you can't really use that. It's very, very dynamic. So do you think that that's where the main problem is from, where it's just the subconscious mind, telling you these negative things, and that's why you become so anxious. That's why you have a mental block. For example, I was listening to this podcast with Joe Rogan, and he was talking to a psychologist, or I think it was Peterson or Patterson. He was saying that the reason why people become so anxious or so angry is because they don't know what they're angry about. So a good practice is to literally write everything down. Try to write everything down that you think that you're mad about, and kind of reverse engineer or decipher why you're mad. If not, if you just think about it, you're not going to resolve the actual problem. So it's better to
Yeah,
really
that's
just
well
write.
said.
And that
Yeah.
way you're kind of basically unraveling your subconscious mind onto pen and paper, so your conscious mind can really make an understanding of it. So you think that play here is just about understanding your subconscious mind, putting it into pen and paper, and using your conscious mind to understand it and then figure out ways to, make good habits.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely. And pen and paper is a great way to do it, because inside of your mind, it's, as you and I both know, there's no limit to the size that you can create a problem to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's literally no limit to what you can think about in your mind. So things can sometimes, you can spiral out and make things much bigger than they need to be. When you just live inside of your own head.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes by writing it out, absolutely, it really does just crystallize and simplifies what could be a chaotic mind, right? Because then you just put it down on paper, and then just by the fact of bringing it to the physical reality of just writing it down, oftentimes that just, you start to get clarity on what the hell you're really thinking. It gets you out of the abstract and brings you to the absolute.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
just out of curiosity, thinking about high level entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates,
Yeah.
Steve Jobs at the time, where do you think, because a lot of those entrepreneurs, they came from a really good household, and they don't need that added motivation to get away from the fears of not paying for rent or not eating at all. So where do you think their mindsets are compared to other people who are maybe struggling a bit, or middle class families? Where do you think their mindset is? Like, what do you think is totally different in their mindset compared to other people? Because, like you said, we all have 24 hours in a day. We're living in an information age. You can learn anything, right?
Yeah.
But where do you think they have in terms of their structure and their mindset that makes them the people they are?
It's a great question. And having worked with people who have worked with them, um, the answer is pretty much always the same when they talk about guys like that, Richard Branson and all these, these billionaires. And it's pretty simple. It's hunger. They have that absolute drive and that need. It's a need for them.
Mm-hmm.
Just, and it comes back to what we were saying is, and I don't know what their specific makeup is. I don't know their history, right? I don't know their upbringing specifically and what motivates and drives them. But what I can tell you is this: they link a tremendous amount of loss or pain, as we've been talking about, to not winning. And they link an enormous amount of pain to winning. And it could be that by the way, the scales aren't balanced. They could link a lot more pain to not winning, right? Or to losing. That drives them more. But what I can tell you is they would never have gotten to where they've gotten to. They would not have put the years of trial and error in if they didn't have that fear of failure on some level and that absolute joy of success.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it like this: like the average person, if there was a spectrum, and there's a -10 for pain and a +10 for pleasure, right? And 0 is sort of, it doesn't mean anything really. It's like you're not really feeling that much, right? Feeling nothing. The average person, they're consciously, they don't even know how to do. Most people don't know how to give themselves pain or pleasure. But most people live somewhere between 2 to 4 on either side, right? And by the way, and the things that they link pain and pleasure to are stupid things, like their girlfriend cheating or something like that, right? Things that don't necessarily move them forward as an entrepreneur, although I'm sure some great entrepreneur ideas have started because of a dude and his girlfriend cheating, probably. And he's like, screw you, I'm going to show you, right? But like, my point is, is the best athletes, the best entrepreneurs, they know how to get themselves to 10 on both sides, right? LeBron James, this guy isn't lucky, right? You know, if you look at Michael Jordan's history, LeBron James's history, if you look at Steph Curry's history, these people, they don't practice at the same level as their teammates. If you know their backstory, you know that they practice like an insanely higher level than their teammates. They, you know, it's something I think Steph Curry, you know, has to sink something like 5,000 shots a day or something like that. I remember this one story about a guy named Jerry Rice. I don't know if you remember who that is. Okay,
I know.
so Jerry Rice, I got to work with one of his teammates at one point, and Jerry Rice, he told me the story. He said, I used to come to practice every single day, and I would be one of the. He's like, I was early to practice. He goes, no matter how early I got there, guess who was always there before me? Jerry Rice, right? And for those who don't know, Jerry Rice was arguably one of the best wide receivers of in history, right? Certainly a Hall of Famer. And so he said, and here's the craziest thing about Jerry. He goes, we did practice, and so we'd all line up where the quarterback would, you know, snap back, throw the ball to the receivers, and they would just do this in rotations, basically, just get reps of catching the ball, right? And he said, so everybody, the way they do it is a regular person would come up to the line, right? Height, right? The guy would run, guy would throw the ball, wide receiver, who's not Jerry Rice, would catch it. He would stop, and then he'd walk back, right? He said, Jerry Rice never did that. He said, here's what Jerry did. Hike, he would come back, he'd snap the ball, throw it. Jerry would catch the ball and full speed sprint every single time to the touchdown. Every single time, right? And he said, and this guy who I know, this guy's named Bo Eason, by the way. Bo said, he goes, after a while, I asked Jerry, he's like, why do you do this every time? He's like, every single time. I know this for months or years at this point. He goes, and Jerry told me, he goes, because every single time these hands touch a ball, the ball is going to the end zone. And that was his psychology. He was just different. And it wasn't that he was built different or that he was nothing was different about him. He just made a conscious decision of, I like pain to not being the best. I refuse to not be the best. I like absolute pleasure to get in this ball in the touchdown zone every single time. It produced a different level of performance and practice in him. And as a result of that, he was a different level of player, right? Most people are just living, again, between that spectrum of like for pleasure, for pain. And so they're like, if I win, it's great, but it's okay. And if I lose, it's shitty, but nah, you know what I mean? Day goes on. Those guys don't have them. It's lose or die, right?
Yeah, I think there's another story I heard about Jerry Rice where I think they won the Super Bowl, and I think the quarterback at the time, I think it was Montana, he said he went to the training ground to pick something up, and he saw Jerry Rice training literally the week after they won, the Super Bowl, and everyone was literally just celebrating, and he's still training. Now, do you think that, these really successful people, these billionaires, right, that their main focus isn't about, oh, how much money I can make. It's rather how much value I can bring. Because for any entrepreneur, they can be motivated by money. Nothing wrong with that. But do you think the really true driving force is not the money, rather of how much value you could provide? Because if you provide value, the money will come.
That's a really great question. I think to answer your question, I think a lot of times it can start with money. But money is a pretty shallow motivator, because when you make enough of it, you kind of get to this point where you're like, this didn't do anything for me personally. I mean, yeah, I have nice toys, but like, I'm still me. I'm still dealing with whatever my shit is. So I think it might kind of prime the pump, meaning like it might get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
But I think someone to become like a 10 or 20 year success story, it has to become about contribution. I think for most people, that's because that driving force, you can never really, it gives you so much pleasure to do it, and there's no limit to how much more of it you can create. So it's this sort of like positive, endless wellspring of motivation. I think you and I both know that the amount of money you make is going to be in direct proportion to the amount of value add or the level of problem you can solve. I think for the most part, the best entrepreneurs are obsessed with adding the value, and that's what drives them.
And I think that's a good point where everyone it is motivated by money. Maybe that's the initial, the initial spring. Because I think after making so much money, this is the only way this is my opinion. After making $10 million, $100 million, another $10 million won't really affect you. What would really affect you is the contribution that you put out for
Totally.
other people.
Yeah. 100%. And ultimately, which one leaves a legacy, right?
Oh yeah,
It's
legacy. Hmm.
in legacy, it taps into one of those needs of there's so many needs that get hit by legacy, but one, that sense of importance, that sense of I mattered, that's a deep, deep need in the human psyche. Another deep need is the need for connection and love. And another need is the need for there's 6 needs that I subscribe to, and they come from Tony Robbins, but um, you know, legacy taps into a lot of them. But one of the big ones is I mattered. You know what I mean? And you can see the impact not in how much money I made and the toys I had, because no one cares ultimately about how many Rolls Royces I have or whatever. But it's like if I can have people talking about me long after I'm dead, if I made a difference in this world, or the history books can write about me, that does motivate a lot of people. That sense of I had impact. And impact, I think, is a far more superior motivator than income.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We can see that when Maradona died, literally Argentina they were in
Like,
tears for like many days,
yeah,
and what he
yeah,
really wanted was to bring the World Cup to Argentina, and that was his greatest, motivating factor, and that's what he
right,
did,
right,
and people love him for that. He left a legacy behind him, and I think
100%,
that's
man.
gonna be a really good driving force for the rest of your life. Finding that legacy, providing as much value as possible. So when you do die, people remember you. And I think that's, if not the biggest driving force for any, athlete or entrepreneur out there.
100%. And something this might be interesting as well to mention. It fascinated the hell out of me. There was a study that was done. I can't refer which one because I don't remember, but there's a study that was done that showed that when a human being puts their intention or attention on another human being, right? So it's like if you're in a car, for example, and you're looking at another person through the window, sometimes you'll notice the other person looks back at you. It's like they're there. So the study showed that when you put your intention or attention on something, your energy field grows, right? And what's interesting is when when you're putting the intention on the person, their energy field grows too, and then there's an attraction between you guys. Meaning attraction, meaning it's not necessarily like nothing sexual, but it's like
Hmm.
basically just like you guys notice each other. Why am I saying this? Because the way we've been designed, right, is when you put your attention on something outside of yourself, meaning service would be a great example of this, right? You're sending your energy out to something more than you. Life actually increases your energy field. So it's almost like we get more energy by actually putting our attention onto something greater than us. Life supports us in serving others by giving us more energy when we actually have an intention to serve others.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's so true. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it's so true. And I think Tony Robbins in his book, kind of close things out here. I read his book, Money Match of the Game, and he said, yeah, you know, you gotta provide as much value because, like I said before, once you provide a lot of value, good things will come. And I definitely believe in good karma.
Yeah.
So, Amiri, I don't want to take too much of your time here. So, if people want to be mentored, coached by you, or learn more about you, where can they, hit you up and check you out?
Yeah. So, my socials are Amiri Paul. It's Amiri Paul, AMIRI PAUL with an underscore. But if you just put in Amiri Paul, that'll pop me up. My website is the same thing, AmiriPaul.com. And you're welcome to email me at Amiri@AmiriPaul.com. And I'm always looking to, I'm always looking to meet and connect with people who are on the path to self-mastery within their own worlds, whether that's in entrepreneurship, whether that's as an artist, whether that's just in their own personal development. Um, that's the tribe that I'm creating, and that's the tribe that I'm inviting in as well.
Dope, dope. So I'll put that in the show notes so anyone can click on that, click on your Instagram, social, email you, or go on your website to check out what you have to offer, and they can
Yep.
be part of your network.
Yes.
So Miri, again, it
Andres,
was definitely a pleasure, bro.
pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, man.